Welcome to Naked Reflections, brought to you from the Wolf Institute. I'm Ed Kessler, and each week I'll be taking an in-depth look at the stories reported by our friends over at the Naked Scientists. What does the latest scientific stuff mean for the rest of us? Stay with us and find out. Recently, NASA made a bit of history with its first all-female spacewalk. The two women astronauts stepped out of the International Space Station to mend a failed power unit.
So I just applied to become an astronaut since it was a dream of mine since I was 5 years old. And luckily, I think some of my experiences working with the physiology of organisms in extreme environments, like the Antarctic or with these bar-headed geese, helped them see that perhaps my background, my diversity as a human would be pretty useful in these space environment as well.
Astronaut Jessica Meyer speaking on the Naked Scientists just before her historic walk. This item got us thinking about the subject of inclusivity in society, science, academia, and religious institutions. A big subject for sure, and an area where scientists and faith leaders have not always covered themselves with glory. With me to discuss matters are Dr. Leah Tarragon-Zeller, Research Fellow here at the Wolf Institute, and an expert on grassroots interfaith initiatives amongst women. Izzy Clark-Headley, final year undergraduate student at Girton College, Cambridge, and their Ethnic Minorities Officer, and James Sinkins, Access Officer for the African Caribbean Society and second year at Pembroke College. Welcome all. I struggle with this term inclusivity. I don't know what it really means. And here we have a panel representing different ethnic minorities, questions of gender, religion. So what does it mean to you? Leah?
To me, inclusivity is really just one word. It's power. It's a moment when people realize that they have had all the power in their hands. And the question is, what do they do with it? Inclusivity usually means that there have been only men here before, typically only white men. And the question is, who and how are they going to be allowing in? And I say that because inclusivity always sounds very nice. Oh, we'll let you in, right? But letting you in is still filled with power.
And do you feel let in, or do you feel you're still you're fighting for your place?
I think it depends where. Being a woman, being a religious woman from a minority group means that there's some spaces that people don't even realize that they're not letting me in. I'll give you the easiest example. I moved to Cambridge and realized, I hadn't checked ahead of time, that the department seminar that I was going to was on a Friday between 4:15 to 6. That has been the legacy in Cambridge for quite a while. 4:15 to 6 is not only anti-family time, it's anti-Jewish time. In the winter, it's always Sabbath, Friday at that time, and nobody had ever thought that that is a space that means that a door is locked.
And so it's an exclusive space that you had to push back on. What about you, Izzy?
I would say that inclusivity for me is the acknowledgement that spaces need to be representative and diverse, making sure that it's really the pursuit that everyone can feel comfortable in a space and everyone can feel like they can see themselves in an environment. So it really is twofold. It comes from those who have historically not had to think about any person diverse from them, but also those diverse individuals knowing that exclusive spaces are no longer exclusive.
And have you also, in your own experience, had to face the sort of challenges that Leah's just mentioned and push back on the sort of people being exclusive and excluding you?
I would say I have, but I don't know how explicit it has been. I would say that because I guess in Cambridge spaces, there are not a lot of Caribbean students and I'm of Caribbean heritage. And just reminding people in general that my experiences may be different to yours, and that, for example, in the African Caribbean Society, there is a lot of people from mixed heritage, but a large amount of the students there are from the continent of Africa. And I think in those spaces when it's heavily one type of experience, I've had to remind people that that is not my story, or this is what my story is, and this is what it means, and this is what I can bring to the table.
Right. James, you are Access Officer for the African Caribbean Society. Is that something that that you recognise?
I'd say my reasons for becoming Access Officer were more because, back home at school, like a lot of people, they were kind of averse to applying to Cambridge. They thought, it's kind of it's an impossible thing to reach. I was among them until it actually happened. I was just thinking, they were all like really bright students. They should have tried. They should have, invested as much time as they could into it because the chance was really there. But it's just this image that Cambridge is just this faraway place that it's almost unreachable, which isn't true. I wanted to change that slightly. Yeah. So I guess that links to inclusivity because I guess image, although it's hard to control your image, it does have an impact on who approaches you and yeah, exactly.
Because there's been quite a lot of publicity recently, hasn't there? With the Stormzy scholarships, with the taking up space, particularly in Cambridge. What difference has that made?
I say it made a huge impact. Stormzy sort of co-signing the ACS has really boosted sort of our reach because we as Access Officer I carry out access initiatives with the rest of the committee, of course, and his help has really boosted our reach. So we have an annual access conference where we sort of detail applying to Cambridge, what it's like for students of African and Caribbean heritage. I think this year the one that we just had, it's been the biggest one so far. We can't just say it's just our publicity. I mean, we did run around, trying to get
Stormzy helped, right?
But Stormzy helped. He did help, of course. We really appreciate him because he shouted us out on Twitter, and I just think it's amazing.
Yeah. Can I ask you? I'm wondering. You spoke a lot about images, and it struck me very much when I started going to Newnham College, which is a female college in Cambridge, that just walking around and seeing pictures of women on the walls, having images of women looking at you, and I don't know what it feels like for you as well, in Gurdon, but I suddenly realized how much the images make a difference and how different I feel when I see women around me. And I'm wondering, have you ever had such an experience, or can you create such an experience?
Yeah, sure.
Both of you. Yeah.
I feel like there are many images of, say, black academics, that kind of thing around. So I can attest to the opposite. Right. So where I'm from in London, it's a very sort of diverse area. Strangely, my school had no white students. My sixth form, to be specific, which is strange in England, obviously, but that was how it was for me. So it was like I didn't have to think about my heritage really until I came to Cambridge. And I was like, okay, I'm actually very different. I guess it makes you second guess a lot of things. Like I'll be walking around town and someone's staring at me. I'm like, is it because of this? Is it because of that? Do I look weird? Mm-hmm. So I can't really say you can't say what someone's thinking, but being in a space where you're very different, it makes you second guess almost every interaction. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I would say on the point of images, I think for me at Girton, as it was one of the first places that women could study and get a degree, it's very powerful. I do look around and I see the pictures of matriculation photos of women on the walls, and it is very empowering. However, there's not a lot of representation outside for the BME experience. Yeah. So I think one of the main things I've been trying to do, I have done as ethnic minorities officer there, is that I've been going to the archives with my JCR, and we've been finding images of BME alumni. So we found students from all the way back to the 1800s that came to Girton from India, Egypt, the Caribbean, the continent, and just pulling out those images and pulling out those stories, and I've been posting them on our social media pages, just to keep that thing you said about images. It's really important for people to see their legacy in a place, and especially for Girton, it's their 150th anniversary this year. Well, it was in October, and I think it's really important that you can see yourself there. I'm walking the halls, I'm living the experience, and I want to know who else has done that.
Right.
It's interesting because my college, St Edmund's College, has just made me think that all the pictures, all the portraits are men, and they're all white. So that's something I'm going to take away with me. We have just appointed our first female head of house, so there's something. But nevertheless, the student community is incredibly diverse, but not necessarily the fellowship or the officers of that community. Yeah. Yesterday, I went back to my old school in London. Now, when I was at that school, there was one black child, the sixth form. But now it's incredibly diverse. And having lived in London and moved up to Cambridge, I had the same experience where I didn't notice a face of colour in London, because you just don't. Whereas here in Cambridge, you do. And so it's good to hear that there's an improvement, but it's still a long way to go. So what more can be done to make not just the University of Cambridge, but other universities more inclusive?
For me, the simplest thing, or the first thing that could be done, was similar to the work I've done, is that looking at increasing the images of representation throughout the universities. So highlighting those individuals that are diverse and what they've done at the university, whether that be here or that be in other universities, just to change the narrative. I think similar to what James was saying about students not feeling that Cambridge was a space for them because they didn't see it or they didn't know. I think across the board, it's pulling out the stories where that's not the case, so people can see that. And as I said when I was talking about my definition of inclusivity, so people can see that that's a space that is open to them, that has been available to someone that looks like them or from a heritage or a background similar to theirs.
Well, I wanted to add to that and to say something more. I've been studying kind of female interfaith initiatives in the UK on a very grassroots level, and I've been really interested in watching how women, particularly from religious settings, create leadership spaces and that. And I've experienced this myself and heard this from others, that many times you'll get a phone call saying, oh, we're putting together a panel and we need, a woman from a religious minority background. Now, you could see that phone call as an empowering one, and you could also see them as, a moment of reifying borders again. And it's really, really tricky because we do want to make sure that images and panels are representative of the diversity of real life. However, when you're inviting, and I felt this my own many times, you could have said something different when you invited me. Even if you had in your head that I needed to tick a box that you have, you can invite me and say, you're doing really interesting work on, please sit on the panel that we're putting together on. If I was a male, you would have invited me like that. So if you want to invite me and you want me to come, respect me.
I guess I can see what you're saying. It's kind of like, obviously your identity is important to you, is who you are. But outside of that, you have like you have a regular life. So it's kind of like being put into a hole again, but in a different way.
You use the term BME, and I was reading that term, or BAME, is also quite controversial and problematic, partly because it excludes others. And you mentioned yourself coming from a Caribbean heritage, perhaps a smaller group amongst the Afro-Caribbean society.
Yeah, I would definitely say that. I think in society as a whole, we're trying to move away from the term BAME because it, in one light, some people argue that it lumps too many experiences together and you can't respect the nuance of the situation. And then in the second sense, as you said, it excludes some individuals. So that's why I really push for my role at Girton to be called Ethnic Minorities Officer, which is its official title. It's really hard to move away from the use of the term because being able to think of a category, okay, BAME, begins the conversation, but it just doesn't take it far enough. And I guess at this point, I would also point to James saying how before I came to Cambridge, I didn't know what that was. I was like, what? Sorry? Your BAME, is it? I just really didn't know what that was. So it was just like, oh, okay, adjusting to that title. And I guess, so that's like the first kind of barrier, I guess, with the title. It's trying to recognize the lack of inclusion, but also being a bit exclusionary at the same time. So I would say moving forward, we need to find a way to straddle that tension a bit better.
And a lot of it sounds like is about educating people, educating your own communities and other communities, whether it's gender related or ethnic related or national related, because so many of us, I include myself, aren't quite sure of what words to use. So we're extra careful, and maybe, Leah, in some of the invitations, they're not quite sure what to say, so therefore say the absolute minimum, and you hear something else. So maybe there's a nervousness about what people are saying and how they're asking you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something about people being nervous about it, but it still doesn't give. I just think that people need to be more reflective and try to put themselves in other people's shoes and try to listen, try to think what it would feel like if they were in the person's shoes who's getting that type of invitation. Just try to be a little bit more reflective. But what I do think that is really, really important is that we live in a world in which I think on a formal level, people understand that doors need to be opened. But the trickier thing is in an informal level. Because as we know in life, you can get a spot into a university, you can be part of a department, but there's many, many other levels of networking and of choosing the right topic for a dissertation and knowing which parties to go to and knowing which thing. There's a lot of other decisions that many people either come with that type of knowledge or already have networks that know to tell them to do this and to do that. And if you're coming without that type of networking and without that type of background because you're the first in your family or because you are the first in your entire school to come to a place like this, then you have no idea. And the only way is for other people to give you that information. And it's tricky because it's not information that you can read on the Cambridge welcoming, whatever. It's all informal. So how do people go that knowledge? It's really tricky.
As part of my role as ethnic minorities officer, you have to, or you're invited to hold a talk on with the freshers about race and respect with some other equalities officers. And I think when I was approaching that task, it really was important for me to push the idea of challenging your assumptions. So similar to what you said is pushing the idea that we need to care and respect and empathize with everybody's situation. So when you're making a comment or making an assumption, before you do that, why are you making it? What effect is that going to have? How would it feel if it was played out in your situation? What is going on behind the scenes? So I think, as you said, it's about society as a whole reflecting and taking the time to really think, what are the assumptions before I say something? What are the assumptions before I make a certain action or include or exclude a certain person, or, as you said, invite someone to a panel?
You're listening to Naked Reflections with me, Ed Kessler. This week, I'm joined by Dr. Leah Tarragon-Zeller, Izzy Clark-Headley, and James Simpkins. And we're discussing inclusivity. And that includes you, dear listener. Leah, part of your role at Cambridge was to serve as the chaplain to the Jewish community, or co-chaplain to the Jewish community. And there is there not? I mean, I'm often asked, doesn't it all go back to religion? The problem of exclusivity, whether it's about gender and patriarchy, whether it's about elitism. I'm sure you've been asked that question as well. So I'd like to widen it out and explore whether some of the challenges we're facing have religious roots.
Religious roots is obviously a tricky question to answer because when you think about religious roots, both in Judaism and other religions, patriarchy is what was everyday life when these religions were, being formed. When you look at something and say, oh, Judaism in the Bible or in the Quran, it says whatever it is it says, you have to understand that it's both religion and culture meshed together. And it's extremely hard to make a separation between the two. So if you look at the Bible, for example, and you look at the beginning, so you see Adam and Eve, and you have these different creation stories, and then you have this documentation of history, and it's all male, right? If you have to compare how many women have names in the Bible, and the Bible is something that we all share, all three. There's other religions as well, but the three monotheistic religions, they all share the very same beginning point in which men count and women don't. So you do have female leaders, but they will be the minorities at that moment in time. Is it religion? Is it culture? It's extremely hard to make that type of a shift. I can say that in today's world, when religions are going back to canonical texts and using them to continue religious practices and to continue questions about gender segregation and prayer and leadership and whatever it is, it will sometimes have a different trajectory when you're trying to create change within a religious setting and when you're trying to create setting within a secular setting. But as I've said that, I'm very unhappy with this dichotomy between what you can call religion and secularism, because the history of the two are so intertwined that it's extremely hard to make a specific decision on that, I think.
Well, presumably, picking up something that Izzy said, that setting up models, even if they are the minority in the Bible or they're the minority in Cambridge, or having portraits of the small number of Black and African and Caribbean students, is something that we need for everybody to see, not just people from that heritage, but for white men like me. What about some of the controversies over statues, for example, where they should be taken down, like in Oxford we had with the Rhodes statue, here in Cambridge at Jesus College, the Benin bronze statues as well. I mean, is that an issue, or are we making sort of a mountain out of a molehill?
Previously, when the statues were taken, the view on colonialism is, it's a human right in a way. Like, you have the right to conquer and, you know, take down. In today's society, we view that as wrong. It's stealing, it's killing, it's, you know, it's invasion. I guess it's a positive move to go back on that, to show that this is how far we've come as a society. We don't need to steal from each other. We can respect each other's cultures and, you know, return possessions. It was someone's possession, to put it one way. So I think it was a really positive move of Jesus to take the statue out from where it was and reconsider where it should be.
So do you think, James, do you feel more optimistic that there is progress, there's momentum, and we mentioned the Stormzy impact, but beyond that, is there greater awareness of these issues in the wider community, in the whole community, not just the BAME community?
I say it depends where you are. In Cambridge, there's a movement among the university to, you know, improve on these issues and raise awareness and that kind of thing.
Do you get pushback though? Do you also get pushback?
As in, I'll tell you what, go on Facebook. You're not going to enjoy it, but go on Facebook, find any video relating to this and just read the comments. They're all British people, and I'm not going to go into detail, but you'll be disappointed. Well,
you know what? When I set up the Wolf Institute 20 odd years ago, I was just a student here at Cambridge, and I was told in no uncertain terms, with some fairly strong swear words, just to back off. It was wholly inappropriate. And this was just, at that time, Jewish-Christian relations, you know. So there is resistance. And you're right, one of the things about the social media is you can easily put up comments that are vile, whether it's about colour or religion or gender. I don't know what we do about it other than keep trying and making change and having models like you, but others as well, standing up and saying, no, this is wrong.
So Stormzy Scholarship, for example, the comments wouldn't be like, you know, I don't want this to be a thing. It was more of a thing like, why is it for them and not for me? So it obviously comes from a lack of understanding, which is annoying on our part, because like, I'm not trying to harbor money for myself. It's just like, it's harder for students from my background to come here, or at least it shows in the admissions.
Is it also part of the flawed human condition, the sort of tendency towards prejudice, whether it's against colour or gender?
Yeah, I definitely think I would add to that in the sense of, so in my role as the ACS's first Caribbean officer, I did come across some concerns and resistance as to the impetus for the role. Is it going to be divisive? Is it going to take away from the ACS? And basically the concerns were just people being uncomfortable about change. And I think that is mirrored in like these other movements as well, is that it invites people that may have been in a privileged position to kind of check that and kind of reflect on their situation. And it, as James mentioned, it brings people into this insecure place of, what about me? What about my experience? Or is my experience now of less importance to someone else? And I think as society, we need to move away from that. To become more inclusive, or to move into more inclusive spaces, it's identifying that it's okay. Like my story or my journey is still relevant to myself and to the people like me, but there are so many other stories that need to be told. And by including people, it's not excluding myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if I could just add to what you're saying, Izzy, and also maybe ask both of you, but you were speaking about change and you were using the word fear. And I think that emotions are no less important here, because when we're speaking about change, like you rightfully said, you know, people are scared. It questions their own being. The people who are opening the doors are very scared about what that opening can do. Is it going to flood everything so much that I'll lose my own standing? Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a very, very delicate dance that needs to be done. And I use the word dance purposefully because it's an embodied gesture of opening a door in which both people need to move for something to happen. Mm-hmm. Opening the door, having somebody, the image of having somebody opening up a door and let people in is an image that is a solid image of one person standing and the other person moving. Mm-hmm. But for it to work, we need to both move. We both need to move. And it's a cognitive change and it's an emotional change. And it's very, very tricky because it's loaded for both people. It's loaded for everyone. And sometimes when we're emotional, we're a little bit less careful. And we need to learn how to dance it, is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I'd like to add to Izzy's point as well. And also go back to the discussion about the term BME. Because I guess once you use that term, it kind of suggests, you know, a community of just BME people is just kind of some kind of frictionless utopia, which is just not the case.
It's exclusive, isn't it?
Yeah,
Say that
exactly.
yourself.
It just reduces the experience completely. I mean, there are tensions between BME communities, loads of tensions between them.
Right.
And that was more evident to me than tensions between white people and BME students or BME people, because I was surrounded by, to quote marks again, BME people. So it was strange for me because, when I was at home, the racism that I witnessed and experienced was not from white people. It was from other people of other, backgrounds. So I'd say moving forward, you have to really realize that like every single experience is different. Every single one is going to have some difference. Although there's going to be alignment of experiences, each experience is completely different, and that has to be acknowledged for progress to be made, in my opinion.
Well, thank you, everybody. It was a wonderful conversation. I'd like to thank my guests, Izzy Clark-Headley at Girton College, and Leah Tarragon-Zeller here from the Wolf Institute, and of course, James Simpkins from Pembroke College. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to get in touch with any comments, thoughts, feedback, or reflections of your own, you can email reflections@nakedscientists.com. In the meantime, you can find more episodes of Naked Reflections and subscribe to the Naked Reflections podcast at nakedscientists.com/reflections. Do join us next time when we'll be talking about the ideas of travel, from pilgrimage to package tours.